not being bound by anything, not by morality, not by law, not by human relationships, not by any kind of convention. What does that actually look like? And I guess profoundly, and more to the point for us, does it actually bring some sort of lasting satisfaction?
Welcome back to Unpacking Ideas, and thanks for tuning in if you're new here. Today we're going to be unpacking part 1 of Faust by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Helping me unpack this book today was Phil Kubasov. Phil is the founder of the New York Mythology Group and a longtime student of Goethe's Faust. In our conversation today, we talked about the historical context of Faust, the legend of Dr. Faustus. We talked about alchemy, magic, romanticism, the limits of empiricism. We talked about the Book of Job, the necessity of evil, the spirit of negation, striving, contentment, guilt, and redemption. And towards the end of the conversation, we got into Oswald Spengler's analysis of Faust in The Decline of the West. This is probably one of those books where you can spend a whole lifetime reading it and trying to understand it. So I was incredibly grateful to have such an experienced guide like Phil by my side. He really helped to provide some necessary context and to shed some light on these various themes in the book. So whether this is your first experience with Faust or you've already, read the book and have some familiarity, I think this conversation will have something for everyone. Let's get into it. Here it is, my conversation with Phil on part 1 of Faust. Welcome back to the podcast, Phil.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yes. So we went through Dante's Divine Comedy a couple summers ago, 2 summers ago, I think. I remember actually in that conversation, you briefly mentioned Faust. And I think you were talking about Oswald Spengler, his kind of mentioning Faust as maybe capturing the spirit of modernity.
Yes, I read Faust for the first time when I was, I want to say maybe 12 or 13, and I was captivated with all the classical references as well as alchemy and magic and all this devilish stuff. And so that kind of really excited me at that time. I wasn't really big into deep philosophical underpinnings of it.
Yeah.
But Spengler definitely complemented that initial sort of naive and somewhat superficial view with a really deep perspective on why Faust is so pivotal in the Western canon. And there are really a few works that you can say that about. And Dante's Divine Comedy is one of them. And then I would say Goethe's Faust is the other one.
Yeah.
And then after those two, there may be some works that, of course, are genius, but they're not as comprehensive and epic in their sort of breadth of the topics they cover and their the rich symbology, right? It's multiple levels of insight and ways of reading it and ways of looking at it. That's really what makes these works stand out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really excited to go through all the symbolism and like all the kind of mythic figures, both in part 1 and part 2. And we're going to do a part 2, and maybe towards the end of part 2, we'll get more into Spengler and the analysis of it after we've kind of outlined it. But I want to kind of go into this with the assumption that the listener is not already familiar with this story. So I was thinking we'd do a little bit of groundwork up front to just kind of set the historical context, and then kind of go through some of the major kind of plot details of part 1, and then kind of analyze it as we go.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So just a whirlwind tour of both Goethe's own biography and the historical moment that he occupies. Mm-hmm. So what is that context and background? So Goethe was born in 1749, smack in the middle of the world changing its direction in a lot of different ways. So we have Europe kind of turning away from the monarchies into more modern more radical types of regimes. We just celebrated 250th anniversary of our own Declaration of Independence. That was during Goethe's lifetime. He was only 27 when the American colonies declared independence. In Europe, though, as most of you know, it was the time of the French Revolution. It was the time of Napoleon. So there's a lot of upheaval politically, but also underpinning all of that are the major philosophical movements that affected Goethe's writing and created a type of reaction to a lot of mainstream thinking. So what am I talking about? That's mostly figures like Newton and Descartes that postulated that we can know the world rationally and we can kind of decompose the world into these sort of material things that explain everything about the world, right? And the reaction to that, which started right at, I guess, middle of Goethe's lifetime with figures like Kant, Spinoza, and then later you have this whole Romanticism movement, which Goethe was part of. All of that was a reaction to that understanding of the world, that idea that you can grasp everything by decomposing and by reducing everything to essentially material objects like billiard balls. Kant famously wrote his Critique of Pure Reason right around the time that Goethe was starting to work on his literary works. I think his work was published, I want to say 1768 or something around that time. And of course, in that Critique of Pure Reason, he basically says there are limits to our rational understanding. But where Goethe comes in, he says, that's right, but how do you understand the world? And his way of understanding it was not just through empiricism, but through what he called delicate empiricism, which is a way of saying that you want to experience nature. You want to understand it not by cutting it and killing it and dividing it and dissecting it essentially, but by experiencing it. That's how you understand light. He had this theory of light, and that was his big idea: is you understand light by seeing how it is perceived by human eye, by observer, not just by looking at particles. Then same idea as he applied it to plants and different phenomena.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of put a pin in that, because we're going to shortly return to those ideas when we get to Act 1, Scene 1 of Part 1, where Faust is kind of brooding in his ivory tower and kind of despairing at the fact that this approach to life has kind of let him down in terms of he knows all of these things, he's studied all of these things in the kind of Western academic sense, but he doesn't actually have any true wisdom. Well, in returning briefly to his Goethe's biography, so this piece actually starts with a dedication in which, as I understand it, Goethe wrote this piece over the course of his life. I think he started in his 20s and finished in his 80s, so like 60 years writing this piece. And in this dedication, it's kind of beautiful. He's talking about just a lifetime of working on this piece, and he talks about the characters in Faust as old friends and visitors. Like, he uses some of this really nice poetic language to talk about.
Correct. And also, I think dedication is a prime example of the whole Romanticism movement in literature. And as you read it, it's all about feeling. It's all about how you perceive things, somewhat mystical, somewhat nostalgic. Right. I mean, it's a perfect example of this whole Romanticist movement that cries against just objectifying everything and being very cold and detached. It's the opposite, right? He's very
It's very personal.
Very personal.
You're getting exactly that sense of nostalgia as he's kind of looking back of his years of writing this, and there's even a passage where he's kind of, almost maybe feeling a little bit of uncertainty of, well, what happens once I've released this out into the world, and all these unknown people are kind of seeing my most intimate writing. So very intimate way to begin. And right after that is followed by this prelude on the stage. And in the prelude, it's a conversation between these three people or three archetypes. There's the director, the poet, and the clown. And these are kind of three different perspectives of what a drama should do, what a piece of theater should do. How do you look at this this prelude?
Yeah, I find it very intriguing. And initially, I kind of discounted this section. I thought, like, let's just get started, right? Why do we need these? We're trying to start
A second prelude.
Yeah, why do we need this second intro, essentially? But as I thought about it more, I started appreciating the genius of Goethe in including this. It ties the contents to real life. The two, right? Because if you just start a play, you kind of, we tend to compartmentalize. We read a play over here, then we go and have real life over here. What Goethe is doing is he's bringing the two together, right? In a way that you can't really separate. And he says, okay, let's just start like with this scene where you actually have a business person, right? A director who is concerned about ticket sales and attracting the mob and catering to the mob's interests.
Right.
And let's bring in the poet, and let's bring in this idealism. Let's bring in this sort of high-mindedness and some abstract thinking and so on, this quest for beauty and so on. And let's also why don't we throw in a comic too? And of course, the three of them display the tension in Faust himself, right?
Yeah.
Because he has the strains of all three. He is both idealistically minded, but he's also pragmatically minded. He wants pleasure. He wants to experience things. He's also somewhat ironic. Not as ironic, perhaps, as Mephistopheles, who we're going to introduce shortly, but the comic kind of covers both of those grounds, right? In the sense that the comic is the perfect archetype of Mephistopheles, right? The joker, the jester, the one who constantly undermines and deconstructs things. But at the same time, there is that strand in Faust as well, as we'll see. So, but most importantly, the director and the poet are Faustian in their character, in their archetypes, right? As we're talking about forms, as we're talking about these ideas of something, an essence of something, and then how it's developed, then you introduce these characters and say, well, we have this tension, right? We have the tension between the earthly interest, the idealism, and these tensions are not, they're introduced in different people, but they're really not, they're in all of us woven in together. And that's what Faust, right? So we're already introducing very deep thoughts into this idea that a single person has all of those strands woven into them, and how do you reconcile them, and how do you deal with that tension?
Well, let's get into...
Sorry, can I just mention one other thing
Sure.
Before we move on? In addition to introducing the archetypes, what is also introduced in this prelude is the scope of the work. And it's introduced through the director's own voice, who says we must cover all aspects of life, from heaven to hell and everywhere on the earth. And that sets the stage, both metaphorically and literally, for the scope of the play, right? We want to try to cover all aspects, right? And we're going to start in heaven, we're going to go to earth, we're going to visit hell through various demonic types of festivities and engagements. So the scope is set in the prelude.
Is it a stretch to say this is also kind of what the character Faust is after, in terms of where later you're going to find he wants to experience everything?
That's exactly it.
Okay,
that is exactly it. And that's why I think that the three characters here, the director, the poet, and the comic, are all interwoven in Faust's own personality.
I like that. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's great. Okay, so let's now get to the prologue in heaven. Again, we still haven't, officially started the Act 1, Scene 1, but this is, I think, also really important, this prologue in heaven. So it starts with these three angels singing, and they're kind of singing the praises of God's kind of celestial order, how all of the spheres, are just kind of perfectly aligned and working in harmony. And Mephistopheles enters and immediately starts kind of raining on the parade. And I get the sense Mephistopheles here is basically saying, you can give me all this about this kind of divine plan, but when I look around and I see humanity, I see a pretty kind of absurd, ridiculous creature. I think he calls the humans, he compares them to grasshoppers.
Zikaden in German. I like that.
Yeah, just like
Zikaden.
Endlessly striving.
Yes.
He says, the solar system I must leave unsung, and to mankind's woes lend my humbler tongue. The literal earth god, meaning humans, still persists in his old ways, ridiculous as ever, as in his first days. He'd have improved if you'd not given him a mere glimmer of light of heaven. He calls it reason, and it only has increased his power to be beastlier than a beast. A couple points on this as well is, we often think of Mephistopheles or the devil essentially as being kind of in opposition to God. Mm-hmm. But I think another way to read this is he is kind of part of that divine order in the sense that he is very much invited to be a part of this, whatever this, powwow happening in heaven at the moment. But later in this section, God even kind of alludes to the fact that evil or Mephistopheles is kind of necessary in order to kind of almost like spur man along. He says, man is too apt to sink into mere satisfaction. This is the Lord speaking. Man is too apt to sink into mere satisfaction. A total standstill is his constant wish. Therefore, your company, meaning Mephistopheles, busily devilish, serves well to stimulate him into action. So I found this really fascinating, this idea that it's almost like, humans kind of need a little bit of this spirit of negation, this, whatever, Mephistopheles represents to kind of get us up off of our ass.
Yeah, no, it's, I think it's definitely true. And it's interesting that, like you said, the devil seems to be part of the divine world order. Of course, this whole scene harkens back to the book of Job in the Bible, where the devil is a guest, or at least allowed in the court of heaven. Right? He's not just somewhere in the depths of hell. He is right there with the angels, kind of reporting for duty to talk to God. And then they have this similar argument about Job, almost verbatim. Have you seen my servant Job? Have you seen my servant Faust?
Yeah.
Right? That's almost verbatim from the two sources.
Right.
At the same time, I will mention too that as far as influences go, and I guess we'll talk more about it later, but one of the influences that Goethe had on later important works of literature is a work by Mikhail Bulgakov, The Master and Margarita. And there's also this idea that the devil is a necessary evil. He is called the spirit of darkness, but without darkness you cannot have light. And this is, by the way, very Goethean, because he said exactly the same thing in his scientific discoveries of light and his investigation of light, is that you need an interplay of light and darkness. If you just have light, there's not going to be any colors. Yeah. Because you need some kind of medium to obstruct light, bend it slightly, create all the colors. It's not just pure sort of vacuum that light exists in. In order to see the colors, to see the hues, to see all the different permutations of that, you need some sort of obstruction. You need some sort of darkness, if you will.
Right.
And so this idea is also very deep, and also it's later echoed in Carl Jung and his idea of God as, which he obviously takes from other religions and traditions, but the idea that God encompasses both good and evil.
Right.
And you need that. And that's actually kind of at the back of everything. And it's also a very Nietzschean idea that God is not just all about happiness and love and it's
stasis.
About, right. Yeah. It's destruction. It's kind of everything. It's this force of nature almost. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, and let's lastly just kind of in this section touch a little bit on this wager between the Lord and Mephistopheles, because as you mentioned, this is very much kind of echoing the wager in the book of Job. Faust is kind of a complex character, unlike Job, who is kind of, the model Christian, the perfect straight A student of, doing everything right. Faust, at least according to the Lord, he's still serving the Lord because he's still striving, but he's kind of a little bit lost at the moment. And as we'll see when we get to Faust, he very much is in a kind of dark soul of the night place in his life. So it's interesting here that because it's the Lord that suggests that, look at my servant Faust. I don't know. What are your thoughts here?
Well, it's very interesting because, as you mentioned, unlike Job, who was this picture of a straight A student, Faust is struggling. He is striving. He is dissatisfied, as we'll see in a second. And yet, all of that seems to be what's pleasing to God, at least the Goethean God. And so the bet, in essence, is, can you stop Faust from striving? Because the idea of striving is you become better as you go and you're struggling, you have a conflict, you have this, that, or the other, but in the process you're becoming better. This idea of progress actually is interwoven in that, and the idea of progress really was born out of enlightenment. This idea that we can actually not just go along or fit into the universe, but we can make ourselves and the world a better place, to use a cliche, right? But it's true. That's the idea of progress. And so, can Faust or can Mephistopheles prevent that from happening? Can he actually return Faust in some way to this stasis of being satisfied with status quo? That's the bet.
Right.
And similarly, it will be a very phrased differently, but it will be the same bet that then Mephistopheles expounds to Faust in his study later.
Yeah. The Lord says to Mephistopheles, man errs till he has ceased to strive. I was hoping we could unpack this sentiment a little bit. Is he basically saying as long as man is striving, he is still kind of serving the Lord?
That seems to be what he is saying to me, yes. And it's somewhat contradictory to the spirit of medieval scholasticism and medieval understanding of religion, of Christianity, where it's kind of the opposite. You want to stay within bounds. You want to be bound within these sort of confines, right, that are prescribed for you in every area of your life. Versus Faust, who's constantly trying to break beyond these boundaries, whatever they happen to be, moral boundaries even. And God seems to be kind of okay with that, which is kind of paradoxical. But this brings us back to, it seems like the idea of God that Goethe has is a different idea than the God of the Bible and the God of Old Testament, because it's not the same. It's just not. It's a different conception. It's more of a kind of this pantheistic God of Spinoza, or even a kind of a deist idea of God as this architect of the universe that creates everything and then steps back and lets you take over from there,
Well, and I think the other thing that I think is going to make this kind of that idea a little hard to swallow is after we see all of the turmoil and kind of collateral damage that Faust causes due to his striving. So I think that's kind of one of the things to reckon with is Goethe at the beginning here is kind of holding up striving as this positive thing, but then we're also going to see all of the, kind of turmoil that can be caused by this endless striving in an individual or in a society.
Yep.
All right, let's get into scene 1, Night. It's perhaps the most famous scene from the play. So we start off in this Gothic room. He's essentially in his ivory tower. He's a professor. He's an old man at this point, and he's despairing, basically saying, I've studied everything, philosophy, medicine, theology, and I'm no wiser than when I began.
Yeah. Would this be a good place to mention a little bit about the historical origins of Faust as a historical,
let's do it.
Historical figure. So the story of Faust started circling around in the late 1500s. And we have a first mention, I think, around 1540 in a letter from one abbot to another court astrologer, which at the time was apparently you could mix and match those professions, astrologer, court in the Christian sort of setting. It was interesting times. Anyway, the letter mentions Faust as this traveling, itinerant magician, trickster, astrologer, and every kind of diviner that you can think of. Pyromancer, hydromancer, chiromancer, right? Basically, like you divine using every possible means: fire, earth, hand reading, etc., palm reading. So he is this kind of a fraud. He's called a fraud, but he's also has apparently some educated background and some social hypnotic powers.
Just snake oil salesman.
Exactly. Very interesting character. So that's in the early 1500s. So he dies, the historical prototype for the legendary Faust. And then 40 years later, we have a book published in Germany called the Life of the Damnable Dr. Faust. And and in that book, all of those stories, all of those rumors, all of those legends that by that time coalesced into some sort of mythos about him are collected, and we have this figure who is presented as making a bet with the devil, selling his soul for essentially some type of entertainment on this earth. That's the original setup, and the first book, the Faust book, as it was called, was published in I want to say 1580. And then it became extremely popular. And 10 years later, it was made into a play by Christopher Marlowe. So the opening scene in Goethe's Faust that you just read parts of, it opens exactly the same way in Christopher Marlowe. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that Goethe took his play as the basis. They probably were reading from the same sources, which both start out with Faust in that study, going through and almost, again, the dialogue is almost repeated almost verbatim, where he goes through and says theology, philosophy, law, medicine, all garbage. Right? None of this is satisfying. I need to turn to something more powerful. And what is that? And of course, what is more powerful than all of that? Well, it's magic, it's alchemy, it's things that were forbidden at that time, in 1500s. Presumably, this is where Goethe and Faust is also operating in that same time frame. And that's the setup for what comes next.
Yeah, and in my translation of Goethe's Faust, he says, no dog would put up with such an existence, and so I am seeking magic's assistance. So this is kind of, a last-ditch effort. Are we to kind of assume that Faust has, at this point, really kind of tried everything? Or is Faust more a kind of, ivory tower academic who has just kind of been in his ivory tower his whole life and hasn't actually really experienced the world?
I think the latter, honestly, and that's how I've always read it, is that he has sacrificed living in the world for this academic pursuit of knowledge, which was promised to him, it was promised to him that it would lead him to this higher truth and satisfaction, and in fact it has not. And so he's frustrated because he has reached the apex of learning,
right?
And yet at that apex, he is not satisfied, and he feels like he doesn't know much at all. All he has is this book learning. All he has done is memorize someone else's thoughts, and he's not happy with that.
Yeah.
Now, by contrast, we have another character we're going to introduce in a minute, Wagner, who has done or is on that same path, and he is happy.
He loves it.
He loves it. So,
what more could you want?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. All you need is theory. But Faust is not like that, and he realizes that book learning alone will never satisfy him.
That makes a lot of sense, because after, this monologue where Faust is kind of despairing, he then tries a few things. And the first thing he does is opens up this book to see this sign of the macrocosm.
Right. First of all, what is the sign of the macrocosm? People are debating that, right? There's no, like, it's not like you can open Wikipedia and say, okay, sign of macrocosm. There is debate about what that actually is. But the idea of macrocosm is something we do understand, and it's primarily referring to this idea of Hermeticism, which later evolved into alchemy or converged with alchemy in a lot of ways, is that you have things that you have this connection between things that are in the real world and in the, quote, ideal world. So the macrocosm is the bigger, the ideal, the ultimate reality. The microcosm is you and I, things that we see, things that we interact with every day. The famous Hermetic saying is, as things are below, so are they above. And as things are above, so are they below. In other words, there's this universal connection between above and below.
Yep.
And the idea of alchemy, which again is already kind of referenced here, and we'll see more and more references to it, and we'll find out that Faust's own father was an alchemist, and he operated in his Schwarzküche, the black kitchen. All of that says that the ideas of alchemy are interwoven into this plot. And why? What is their role and what is their importance and the significance in this? The significance is that alchemy is not just about transmuting base metals into gold. It's about transmuting base character into a perfect state of morality and knowledge. And their ultimate goal was not just to find gold, material gold that is, but to find the state of perfect knowledge and perfect understanding, and to find what they called lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone, which is a symbol of perfect knowledge. And of course, Faust craves exactly for that. He wants to have not just experiences, but also understand things at a deeper level. And that's his frustration is, I've read all the books, but it's not giving me what I really want, because I know there's more. Right? It's not like Aristotle didn't know everything. So I need something more. And so he's turning to these other avenues, alchemy, magic, various incantations and ways to interact with nature directly. Right, which is, I guess, where we're going next. I think with the spirit of the earth. Right.
So that's the next thing he tries, is to conjure the spirit of the earth, and he's successful. It's kind of funny. He conjures the spirit of the earth, and immediately, once this spirit comes to him, he's terrified by it.
I find this scene very satisfying in a lot of ways. One of them is like you mentioned, because it's somewhat ironic. Right, you get what you asked for, and it's kind of the reverse of what you wanted. You're scared by it. But one of the reasons why I like it so much is because this earth spirit, Erdgeistes in German, he calls Faust sarcastically. He calls him Übermensch, which is of course Nietzschean, right? The Superman, this idea of a man who is not bound by anything. But in this case, I guess there's some dialogue with Nietzsche here, or maybe foreshadowing some dialogue with Nietzsche, to say that you kind of, Nietzsche, I think you overestimate the power of humans in the face of nature. And there's a debate. Obviously, we go back and forth, right? Sometimes we seem to be the conquerors of nature. But then, an earthquake happens, a calamity, and it puts us back in our place. And we realize, maybe we're not so powerful as we thought. And so this idea of our spirit, this idea of immediate access to nature and all of its power that's unconstrained can be a terrible, terrible thing. So maybe don't wish for it as much as you think, right? Maybe we do need that intermediation that we've built, walls and ways to kind of keep nature at bay. Because when it's unleashed without any limits, without any guardrails, it's terrifying.
It reminds me of the scene in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna presents himself to Arjuna in his kind of undiluted form, and same reaction, kind of, in the fetal position crying kind of reaction to it.
Yep.
So after this happens, this is where Wagner, his basically Faust's sidekick, yeah, his kind of graduate student,
right.
we would probably say,
yep.
Enters, and they kind of have this funny back and forth.
Yes, to me, Wagner represents this tension that we talked about between abstract form and content. Goethe was on the side of expression, an actual messy, imperfect expression over some idealized abstract form. And we'll see it all throughout the play. Later in part 2, it'll be with homunculus. But for now, Wagner represents the empty form, right? He is content with just idealized statements about, the laws of geometry or whatever it is, without any specific content, without embodiment, without incarnation into real experience. And Faust cannot grasp that, and he kind of jeers at that, right? He doesn't accept that as he doesn't accept that as something that is worthy of achievement or note. But Wagner seems to be content with that at the moment.
Yeah.
And this is interesting too. Wagner, as much as we may kind of downplay him and discount him at the moment, he does not stay static. He also evolves. Yeah. Evolution is part of this whole play, and he evolves later into a much more formidable character. But at the moment, he is just, like you said, just a student who is happy to just memorize things and kind of do the rote of repeating back, parroting back these axioms. And he's perfectly content with that type of knowledge in quotes, but not Faust.
Right. So after Wagner leaves, Faust attempts to take his life. He's kind of been humiliated by the earth spirit. He's tried everything, he feels, and he takes some poison off the shelf, and he's ready to drink the poison, and there are bells, Easter bells.
Mm-hmm. Saved by the bell.
Saved by the bell, indeed.
So there now comes this side effect, and you might want to call it maybe Deus ex machina, right? God's intervention to spur him on. This is not Mephistopheles, I don't think, right?
Yeah.
Probably not. So this is probably God's, the God that we met in the introduction, giving him a little nudge and encouragement, because, you can get very cynical and bitter and all of that, and you need sometimes a little perspective, and that's what these bells do. They give him this nudge, this perspective, this experience. It's not just philosophical. It's not just intellectual. It's part of his childhood, part of his memory, kind of stirs him up and gives him hope. He may not even understand how.
Well, and there's the kind of obvious symbolism of Easter and resurrection,
correct?
New beginnings,
exactly.
Right? He's kind of given a second chance.
Absolutely,
as well.
Absolutely.
So we then cut to this scene where he's walking with Wagner out in the city, and I think it's interesting because the tone changes completely. We go from this kind of existential despair to these kind of, we pan around and see all these townspeople just kind of talking about their very trifling affairs.
It's back to the theater, right? We're in the theater. It's very Shakespearean, by the way, and Goethe was an admirer of Shakespeare. The world is a stage, and we're all actors in it.
Yeah.
Right. So you see this world stage. Okay, here you have the devil and God in the background. Here you have Faust, and here you have Wagner, and then there's everybody else who's like enjoying life and oblivious to all the drama.
Right.
It's interesting that Wagner is a little bit dismissive of the common man. Right. He's dismissive of these crowds. But Faust is not. He actually seems to appreciate more kind of being in touch with some of his neighbors, essentially. And some of the neighbors actually are grateful to him because apparently his father saved them from some calamity in the past using his alchemy skills, right? We go back to that.
This is also where Mephistopheles enters, and Mephistopheles is a shapeshifter, and he is first presented in the form of a black poodle. which a black dog, I think that's oftentimes how like an omen is portrayed. I think there's even a black dog in Harry Potter or something like that. But like the fact that it's a poodle, I think is kind of ironic and kind of comical. Maybe, we'll see in Act 2, Mephistopheles takes the form of a jester. There's definitely this kind of comic, absurd kind of element to him.
And theatrical element,
theatrical,
right?
Yeah.
Right. He's changing costumes. He's changing his appearances. But also somewhat biblical in a sense that devil is presented as being kind of a liar and deceiver. And so he's always changing how he comes across. He comes as a angel of light, right? And so on.
Right.
So there is that deceptive nature.
And there's a kind of funny sequence between Wagner and Faust here too, where it kind of gets back to their fundamental difference of Wagner very much just kind of sees things on the surface, and Faust wants to kind of see things deeper. So Faust immediately senses that something is up with this dog, and it's basically like, "Hey man, is that an omen over there?" Like he doesn't, this is me paraphrasing, but
he has a little more intuition.
He has some intuition, and Wagner just keeps saying like, "I don't know what you're talking about. This is a poodle." He says. Faust says, "He's getting closer, round and round he goes in a narrowing spiral. No, there's no mistake. As he comes, look, can you see it too? A streak of fire follows in his wake." And then Wagner says, "An ordinary black poodle is all I can see. No doubt some trick of light deceives your eye." So I thought that was intentional too. Again, the kind of juxtaposition between the person who's just kind of seeing things on the surface level and Faust as well. But basically, so the poodle follows Faust into his chamber or into his study. So the dog is in the background, and meanwhile Faust is transcribing the book of John. He's translating what's in the Bible. In the beginning was the Word, and he goes through a few different renditions, and he ends with, "In the beginning was the deed."
Right. So this kind of echoes what we said initially about Goethe's Faust is this action figure. That's the whole point. Right from the very beginning, he's not content just to be sitting there memorizing,
contemplating,
yeah. Which, by the way, again, was the medieval ideal. Contemplation, right? You become more godlike as you contemplate God. You don't need to do anything necessarily. Yeah. Just sit in your monastery cell and read the scriptures, pray, and contemplate. And as you do this, in New Testament, there's this verse: "You're changed by beholding." Right? As you behold something, and it's true to a degree, you are changed by beholding. But anyway, that was the limit of it. But Faust is a completely different animal, right? And he is apparently the type of animal that God is really in favor of.
Yeah.
He is striving. He is all about grabbing the stars from the highest heaven and reaching down to the lowest hell, right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit. That's what he wants. He wants to see it all. He wants to see not just the good, by the way. He wants to experience the lows, the depths, the highs, the breadth, like everything. What is that? Well, Spengler later, right, writing his book, The Decline of the West, and kind of categorizing various civilizations, he says, okay, there's different archetypes for civilizations, and there's a finite number of them. Actually, there's only he picks 3. There's the Apollonian archetype, exemplified by ancient Greek and Roman civilization, where you had this sort of perfect ideal body as the prime symbol. Then you have the Magian, the magical, the mystical archetype, and that is characterized by a cave. That's its prime symbol, is the cave. You're in an enclosed space, you're sitting there, you're contemplating. And that was the medieval world, right?
Yeah.
The cave, it's also found expression in other civilizations throughout history. But where are we today? We're neither Apollonian, we're not Magian, we are in our own civilization archetype, and that is the Faustian. civilization. He actually calls it Faustian. So he uses Faust as the prime archetype of this type of civilization, and its prime symbol is infinity. Empty space.
Yeah.
Not perfect body, not a cave, just emptiness. And why is that? What is that? Well, it's endless possibility, right? No limits, no boundaries, but also nothing to tell you what or where or why.
Yeah.
So it introduces the possibility of really doing or being anything, but it's not going to give you any kind of assurances or guardrails or direction. It's up to you.
It makes me think of like the existentialists and the existential anxiety and all of that
That's
stuff.
exactly part of that. Exactly part of that. And Faust is this amazing explication of all of what that means. Right? As we follow him along, as we struggle with him, we see exactly what that implies. Both this infinite striving, not being bound by anything, not by morality, not by law, not by human relationships, not by any kind of convention, not by space and time even, or like they basically like go back and forth into different time periods in part 2. Not bound by anything. What does that actually look like? And I guess profoundly and more to the point for us, does it actually bring some sort of lasting satisfaction, etc.? Open question.
That's great. Well, that kind of brings us to the pact between Faust and Mephistopheles, because, just kind of skipping forward a little bit, Mephistopheles transforms from the poodle into another form. I think he's taking the form of like a traveling student or something. And Faust and Mephistopheles get into this conversation, and this wager is kind of worked out between the two of them. And the terms of the wager are, if there ever comes a time where Faust is content and isn't striving, then he can be struck down and Mephistopheles will have his soul. Faust says, if ever I lie down in sloth and base inaction, then let that moment be my end. And this is the very famous line from this. He says, if ever to the moment I shall say, beautiful moment, do not pass away, then you may forge your chains to bind me, then I will put my life behind me. So they make this pact, sign it in blood, make it official, and kind of off we go, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of fast forward a little bit. You want to talk about Auerbach's Tavern?
Just briefly to mention that, so the wager is made.
Yeah.
And Mephistopheles now has this task of trying everything in the world to satisfy his protege.
The man who can't be satisfied.
The man who can't be satisfied, right? Can you create a stone large enough for God not to be able to, move it?
Yeah.
So where do you start? Well, you start with kind of the basic layer, right? Kind of Maslow's pyramid of wants and needs. Start at the base, which is what? Well, have fun, eat, drink, and be merry.
Let's go to a bar. Yeah.
This bar, incidentally, the Auerbach's cellar, or it's an inn. It is actually a real place in Leipzig.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course we should mention that again. Goethe operates within the confines of the Faustian tradition, right? The book that we mentioned, Faust book that was circulating, and everybody knew Marlowe's Faust. So all of those stories include this episode.
Yeah.
So far we haven't invented anything new, but we're about to diverge very quickly. But I just want to say that the reason Goethe includes this episode is probably because it is such a well-known episode and part of the Faustian lore.
Tradition, yeah.
Right, exactly. So you just have to include it.
I gotcha. Yeah, I didn't realize that context.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right, so then next we move to a witch's kitchen. Basically what they're up to in this witch's kitchen is kind of creating a potion that is going to make Faust young again.
Right.
Because again, as we said, he's an older man, and in order to experience everything, that his age is going to kind of get in the way there. So the kind of step one is making him young again.
And how contemporary is that? I mean, we live in a world today where people do not accept their age or how they look, or do not want to accept. And is there anything more Faustian than that, right? The natural order of things is you are born, you age, and you die.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
We're messing with how people are born with genetic engineering. We're now messing with how people age with various medicinal supplements, let's put it, and surgical interventions. So
Jeff Bezos and billionaires spending a lot of money. Yeah.
Super contemporary.
Right. There's also a sequence I want to hit a little bit at the beginning here is Faust and Mephistopheles are discussing this question of how they can make Faust young again. And Mephistopheles suggests the magic, which Faust is averse to, and he's basically, is there any natural way to get younger? And Mephistopheles is like, yes, there actually is a way. You could, go out in the fields and work under the sun and toil and labor. Like that's how you stay young. And Faust doesn't want to do that. I don't know how. Predictably, but I was going to ask, what do you think this is? Just him not wanting to be limited by anything, or is he just impatient? Like he just wants the kind of the quick
fix? That's how I read it.
Yeah.
Impatience or patience is just another way of saying you don't want to be limited by time.
Right. Yeah.
So the idea of impatience is, okay, we don't want to wait for anything. We don't want to be limited by whatever natural time it takes to do anything.
To do the thing.
So everything is automated. Everything is streamlined. Everything is, you cut out all the pauses in life, right? And everything is compressed into this enormously fast moving stream, right? That's what we want today, right? We don't want to be waiting around for anything, whether it's farm life or physical exercise for that matter. Why don't people exercise versus taking a pill?
Take the pill, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's exactly because of the time factor. I don't want to be limited.
Don't want to be limited.
I don't want to put limits on my existence. The limit is I have to spend an hour at the gym every day. That's a lot of time.
That's great.
Right?
Well, and so Mephistopheles says, well, magic it is then.
That's right.
back to the cauldron.
Exactly.
So
the second part of that, of course, there's some hypnotic potion that Faust drinks, and it's supposed to make him fall in love with the next woman that he meets, apparently.
Right.
So,
and love is maybe generous here. I think it, more as a lust potion. It seems, at least initially.
Correct.
So this is where we meet Gretchen. Right after Faust drinks the elixir, he comes across this young woman, Gretchen. I guess woman is even generous. It says 14 in my translation. Mm-hmm. And he immediately begs Mephistopheles to kind of arrange for the two of them to get together. And Mephistopheles is initially a little reluctant just because she's so young, so pure, so innocent. I think he even says, like, I was just watching her confess at the confessional, and she's so innocent, she didn't even have anything to confess. But they kind of hatch this plan that they're going to go into her room while she is away and hide some jewels in her closet.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think, though, that Mephistopheles pities her. So his initial reluctance is not because she is pure or too pure to be spoiled, so to speak. Rather, I think it's because it's too much work. She is too pious, too innocent to subvert, to tempt. Right?
Yeah.
Let's just find somebody at a bar in a red, light district.
Yeah,
that would be much easier.
That'd be much easier. Well, and we later see there's a sequence where Gretchen is actually kind of wise to Mephistopheles. Like she kind of says to him later, says to Faust later, like, I don't like this guy that you're hanging around with. Like, I kind of get bad vibes from him, so to speak. So it is interesting that she kind of has that intuition as well. That
there it is again, intuition, right? Both Faust has a certain intuition about Mephistopheles, and so does Gretchen.
Yeah, and I think in some ways we can argue Gretchen's intuition is
more accurate,
and right. Even though she is
more attuned. Well, so is her mother's. her mother immediately, as she finds the jewels, realizes there's something infernal about this setup.
I think if you find jewelry in your 14-year-old daughter's room, that you kind of sense that something's up, right? So the mother then immediately donates the jewels to the church, which the church gladly accepts.
Very
and there's
comical.
A little line in there about the church kind of never being one to turn down a donation. A little jab at the church at the time. But we also have this sequence where Faust is in Gretchen's room, like before he's kind of placed the jewels. I think we're seeing, there's this kind of character change there where it's not just maybe infatuation. He kind of, I don't know, maybe falls in love with her in this moment. He imagines her as a little girl on Christmas morning, and he even kind of comments to himself, almost like, I came into this room to seduce her, and now I'm, having all these feelings. It's complicated. Again, he's feeling, kind of pulled in different
becomes
directions.
more than just a physical desire for sex. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense, right? Love encompasses more than just the physical. It's emotional. It's some sort of spiritual connection in which he has with her. Maybe he's out of tune with her, as we'll find out.
And to zoom out for a second, do you think the fact that there is even this pursuit of Gretchen, is it kind of implicit there that sex or love will be the thing that makes Faust content? Is that kind of what? Because
absolutely.
Okay, right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Gretchen doesn't appear in the Marlowe version, correct?
Correct, but there's a interesting angle there. At one point, Faust wants to marry in Marlowe's version.
Okay,
and then Mephistopheles essentially talks him out of it.
Interesting. Okay,
so instead, he suggests that let's just go to a whorehouse essentially and enjoy whatever you want to enjoy there, but let's not get tied down to But I guess to answer your question. Is this part of the program? I would say 100%. It is part of the program to see if Faust will be satisfied with the earthly joys of love, sex. I mean, how many people look for satisfaction in relationships?
Yeah.
I mean, the majority, I would say. Right. I mean, at least for men, I don't know about women, but for men,
I think it's
half of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you're feeling some kind of dissatisfaction in your life, and if you're single, I think that's the obvious.
Yeah, good food, couple of beers, and a good, a cute girl by your side.
Yeah, right.
Well, what else do you need?
Right. Okay, so so we've got to the point where Faust has hidden the jewels, or I think it's actually Mephistopheles has hidden the jewels, and Gretchen's mother finds them and then donates them to the church. This kind of happens again. Faust is like, well, we need to put another set of jewels in there. And so eventually Gretchen then takes the jewels to her neighbor's house. I think she kind of concludes, well, if I tell my mom about these jewels again, then she's just going to donate them to the church again. So I'm going to take them to this neighbor woman, Martha. And Martha is very much kind of on Gretchen's side about keeping the jewels. She's basically like, you don't wear them out in public, just, keep this little secret between us.
Martha is great. Martha is this picture of this worldly, mature woman who knows how the world works. And unlike Gretchen, she is not naive. She will take she will take the concrete versus some abstract ideal.
Right. And Martha's going to kind of be the go-between in order for Mephistopheles to kind of set up Faust and Gretchen again.
Right.
Mephistopheles tells Martha that he witnessed her husband's death, and that Faust was also a witness to Martha's husband's death, and therefore, this is kind of an excuse to get them all together. Of course, Faust didn't actually witness the death, so
for all we know, the husband is still alive.
All we know, the husband's still alive, right? But this is kind of how they're going to get together, and we do see somewhat of Faust's conscience throughout this, in that he's not comfortable essentially lying under oath. He is not comfortable saying that he was a witness to this death. And Mephistopheles kind of tempts him or persuades him with the logic of basically like, well, you've already lied in the past. And, you're going to lie tomorrow when you're telling Gretchen how beautiful and how lovely she is and how much you love her just to get in her pants. He's basically saying like, what's one more lie? I don't know. What do you think of this? Because it seems there is kind of throughout this, Mephistopheles is, I mean, obviously a bad influence. He's the devil after all, but he also doesn't kind of have the power to force Faust to do anything. He's more just kind of persuading him, again, kind of undermining.
Yeah, I think that's valid. If you remember in the very beginning, when he entered Faust's study for the second time, Faust had to tell him 3 times to enter.
To enter, right.
Right. So what is the idea? It's volition. Right. The devil doesn't make you do anything. Ultimately, you decide what you're going to do.
Even when he was the poodle, he had to be invited in, right? Yeah, I think that's intentional.
Right, and that's very intentional. But the seduction after the initial entrance is given, the seduction happens in stages, and as you suggested, you don't boil the frog at once. You raise the temperature a little bit, and then you keep raising it. And so the first lie is something small, and then it keeps growing, and by the time we're done, we have dead bodies laying around.
Yeah.
So you start with small lies, and you start with one. Like the way I like to think about it is, by the time we're done in this part 1 of Faust has broken all of the 10 commandments. He has lied, he has stolen, he has coveted, he has borne false witness, committed adultery, and killed. I mean, the whole damn list is basically. And how did that happen? Well, the devil is the seducer, he is the tempter, and so that's part of his program, not just to satisfy Faust. Of course, that's part of their wager. But in the meantime, how does Faust lose his soul? That's, I guess, the other repercussion of this infinite ambition. Yeah.
So just skipping ahead a little bit, basically the arrangement with Gretchen has happened. They share a kiss. They've officially met. They've officially kind of fallen for each other. Then we cut to this forest scene, which kind of seems very out of left field, where Faust has kind of retreated into the woods and is, again, kind of having this kind of spiritual connection with nature moment. And there's some guilt that Faust feels. He hasn't actually done anything too bad at this point. We'll see. He ended up destroying Gretchen's life pretty good. But at this point, he hasn't really destroyed her, but he's already feeling this guilt, and he compares himself to an avalanche. Like, he gets this sense that he is an avalanche and she is this small cabin on the hillside. And Mephistopheles kind of rolls his eyes and says, "To me, there's nothing more insipid in the world than a devil who despairs." I read it as almost as if saying, like, if you're going to be a devil, then just be a devil. Like, don't feel bad about it.
Yeah. I think today we live in a world where some people espouse that philosophy, and they basically say, I'm just going to be bad. Right? Dr. Evil style.
Right.
Most people, though, I feel, live in this world of gray. And so that's what Faust is exemplifying here. He's exemplifying the majority of the people who don't want to be the devil. They want to have it both ways. They want to have everything, the highest stars, the deepest hell, but also they want to have this kind of idealistic...
Clean conscience.
Clean conscience, exactly. I want it all. I want the world and 5%, right?
Well,
they're not willing to sell their soul, essentially. They want the soul, too.
Yeah. Faust then does come back from the forest and the cave, and there might be actually some scenes that are missing. That's one of the commentaries I was reading was saying that perhaps Goethe was going to kind of fill in some of these gaps with more scenes and never got around to it. But we jump in time a little bit to Faust and Gretchen are together, and she is asking about his views on God, and he gives a kind of long-winded answer that I think we can dissect a little bit.
So I would say this is the beginning of the demise in their relationship, in one sense, because what is she doing? Well, she's putting limits on him. She is saying, here's a box. Do you fit in the box or not? Do you believe X, Y, and Z? She's catechizing him. She's asking, here are the tenets of the faith. What do you believe?
Yeah.
And he's kind of
tries to wiggle out of it.
Tries to wiggle out of this by saying, well, what is God?
Yeah.
What is, right?
Yeah.
Let's redefine language here. Feeling is all, famously he says, right? Feeling is all.
Yeah.
Which, again, very romantic, very mystical, also impossible to pin down, right? What do you mean by that?
Right. He says, call it fulfillment, heart, love, God. I have no name for it. Feeling is all. Name is but sound and fume, befogging heaven's blaze. So it's not exactly the answer that Gretchen was looking for. Yeah.
No.
At the end of this scene, he arranges to sleep with her. And there's a problem. Her mother's room is right next to her room, and she'll overhear. And Faust has a solution for that. He's, why don't we kind of give her your mother some of this sleeping potion? And,
provided by Mephistopheles.
Provided by Mephistopheles. What could go wrong, right?
Right.
And Gretchen says, what would I not do for your sake? And then she says, just looking at you, dearest man, what drives me to your will, I wish I knew. With all I have already done, I've precious little left to do for you. And this is, a little bit eerie, this question of like, what is Gretchen not willing to do for Faust? At this point, she's, saying she's willing to do anything for him.
And she's probably sincere.
Yeah.
And yet, we find very quickly that there are limits. And there are certain things that she will not do. And again, she is not a Faustian persona, unlike him. She is still the medieval persona, and she will not overstep certain boundaries, even for him, even for love, even for satisfaction or anything else. And that's where the difference is. And that's why they cannot be together, ultimately, is because she is not willing to say infinity and beyond, right?
Right. She's not really willing to sacrifice her religion, her culture,
a million other things.
Right. Well, so to jump ahead, we find out that this concoction was poisoned or she was overdosed. The mother ends up dying.
Right.
And again, we kind of jump to a scene later where we find out Gretchen is pregnant. So not only did the mother die, but she also got pregnant. And well, I guess we didn't mention Gretchen's brother, but she has a brother who's been off. He's a soldier who's been off at war, and basically Faust ends up killing him in a duel. Right.
So there's the murder.
So there's another murder.
Yeah, another murder. Yes.
And as Gretchen's brother Valentine kind of lies dying, he's basically publicly shaming her, calling her a whore in front of the whole city. So at this point, we've got her brother's dead, her mom's dead, she's pregnant,
publicly shamed,
and
even worse than all of that, to her, she is the sincere believer, comes to church, and she is almost unable to bring herself to confession, to prayer. Her guilty conscience is weighing on her, and she is really in distress. And she is, moreover, scared by what she feels like is this judgment on her that is coming not just in this life, but in the next. And so we have the scene in the cathedral with the evil spirit accusing her of all of these things. She is to blame for. And then there's the intermission, or kind of interwoven with that is this day of wrath hymn or requiem that's being played at the church at the time. So
there's also I thought a beautiful scene before that where she is speaking to a statue of the Virgin Mary.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, very sad. Like, she's very isolated, carrying this unborn child very much like the Virgin Mary. And I thought this was a beautiful scene where she's actually speaking to the Virgin Mary and kind of lamenting and asking for help.
For mercy, for compassion.
For mercy, yeah. Meanwhile, Faust is nowhere to be found, and I think that's very intentional, is that we have this sequence of scenes where he's not present, and then when we do see him again, there's this wild scene called Walpurgis Night, and yeah, maybe I'll let you take the lead on this one a little
bit.
Yeah.
Sure. This episode is based on this belief that on May 1st, there was this witches' Sabbath, a gathering of the witches on this particular mountain peak called the Brocken Peak in the Harz Mountains in central Germany. And it's a pandemonium, literally. All the witches, all the demons, all the spirits, and all the kind of these mythical characters come together and celebrate almost like a counterpoint to Easter and to whatever scenes we saw in the cathedral. This is a demonic counterpoint to that. Right? So revelry, partying, dancing, carousing.
I think at one point Faust is kind of hooking up with the witch.
And there's some really tasty sexual innuendo, and some of this I think was originally withheld by by Goethe from publishing.
Oh, really?
But we have since recovered it posthumously. But yeah, it was considered so, I guess,
X-rated.
Naughty and R-rated then that it didn't make it into.
I didn't know that. That is fascinating.
I mean, we can read some of those lines. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I'm sure our audience is up for it.
Up for it. Well, okay, so I'll read my translation. It's so Faust is dancing with a young witch, and he says to her, "Once I fell to pleasant dreaming. I saw a sturdy apple tree, with 2 apples on it gleaming. I climbed it, for they tempted me. Pretty witch, you want apples of a pleasing size, you've looked for them since paradise. I'm thrilled with joy and pleasure, for my garden holds such treasure." Now this is all a little almost innocent compared to what's going on with Mephistopheles in the Old Witch, which is Mephistopheles dancing with the Old Witch says, "Once I had a savage dream. I saw an ancient cloven tree in which a giant hole did gleam. Big as it was, it suited me. Old Witch, let me salute and welcome you. The cloven hoof shows through your shoe. A giant stopper will ensure that you can fill the aperture."
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Some not so subtle
imagery,
innuendo there. Yeah.
But it's also a little bit more than that. So there is an orgy, and there's kind of this reveling and so on, drinking, partying. But there's also a procession of various characters that represent a cross-section of society. And this is what is really interesting about this scene, is it brings together people from various walks of life. You have, in the beginning there's a minister, a general, a parvenu, new money. There's a romantic author in the mix of the invitees. There's also a person who denies the existence of ghosts.
Okay.
who is coming to the ghost party.
That's funny.
And hilariously, he is called the Proctophantasmist.
Okay, yeah.
Which could be translated as buttock ghost imaginer. And the reason he's called that is because this is modeled on a real person, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Friedrich Nicolai, who was a real publicist at the time of Goethe, who said that people imagined seeing ghosts and spirits, and the cure for that is attaching leeches to your buttocks. so
Interesting. Okay, I read a footnote and was very confused. So yeah.
So Goethe decides to let's bring this guy into this Walpurgis night. So and he's called the Proctophantasmist.
And is Goethe kind of slamming him a little bit here? Okay, yeah,
absolutely.
It's similar. I mean, there's another thing that kind of reminds me of Dante a little bit. He's not afraid to go
bring
from
in contemporary figures and to malign them. Absolutely,
yep.
So
that's happening throughout this scene as well.
Yes, there's amazing leeches to the buttocks.
Yeah, some of these references definitely require some footnotes.
Absolutely.
Well, so at the end of this Walpurgis night scene, Faust sees a vision of Gretchen, and she has like a red line across her throat. Mephistopheles is trying to get him to ignore this vision, basically like, oh, no, don't worry about it, and you basically come back to the orgy, man. You know, that kind of sentiment. Mm-hmm. I took this as basically Faust's conscience, right? He can kind of, get out of Dodge, but he can't kind of escape himself or his responsibilities, in the sense that the guilt and all of that is still with him.
That's another facet of living a life that is unlimited by anything. Eventually, that guilt is just another fact of life, right? If you step over certain moral boundaries, you can convince anybody else in the world. Can you convince yourself?
Yeah. So following this crazy Walpurgis night scene, there's a very small scene that I want to talk on. It's actually the only scene that's not written in kind of poetic meter. Mm-hmm. Somebody I was talking to was saying maybe this is, after this kind of playful rhyming scheme, it almost kind of lulls you back to reality. And, this is a little bit like a hangover, like the morning after this scene, A Dreary Day. So I thought that was an interesting interpretation, because this is kind of where reality's setting in. The witch orgy is over, and Faust is now going back to try to rescue Gretchen from the jail.
Yeah.
Who I should say is she's in jail also because she's murdered her child. Yeah. Which I don't think we've added that to the list of terrible things. Yeah.
Right. I want to call your attention to one thing here in this little episode. Faust realizes that in some ways he has been deceived by Mephistopheles. And he says to him, "Treacherous, contemptible spirit, stand here, use your satanic, bitter eyes wrathfully rolling in your head. Stand there and mortify me by your unbearable presence. She's in prison, in irremediable misery. And she has no hope. She has she'll perish without help, without hope." Mephistopheles replies to this with one line. He says, "She is not the first." So he has zero pity, zero compassion, and also zero remorse for any of this. And that's something that I think we also need to fill out when we paint his character or try to understand his character. As much fun and as much as we like him for his wit and his dry humor and sarcasm and all the rest of it, he is a person that, as Gretchen aptly put it, doesn't love anything or anybody. He doesn't care about Faust. He doesn't care about Gretchen. He doesn't care about anything. He just wants to destroy and let the world burn. He's like this Joker type personality,
like in Batman.
Exactly. In Batman,
kind of let the world burn and
let the world
laugh
burn, and that's the fun part for me, is watching it self-destruct.
That's a good point, because his character, I read something and they called him the spirit of ironic detachment, which really connected for me, because throughout, like you said, there is this kind of witty, funny aspect of him, but you're right, at the bottom of that is a certain kind of cynicism.
But it's more than cynicism. We're all, some people say, a cynic is a former idealist, right?
Okay, yeah.
Which means you loved something at some point, and now you're a cynic. But that means you had love to begin with. He is empty. There is no love ever, not to start, not to end. He is like this ideal vacuum, like a black hole that literally has nothing to give. right? And no desire to give or to better anybody. It's just like this enjoyment of destruction. I mean, he calls it that. He in the very beginning, there in the intro, he says, "I actually would like to strip the world of everything and make it just like it was before." Before, meaning when it was a void, there was nothing. It was just a void. And so that's a fatal flaw in this character that makes him unbearable in one sense. Whereas Faust, for all his flaws, for all of his failings and cruelty, maybe even, he loves Gretchen and he regrets. He has that regret. He has that, and that's part of the striving too. He does realize I screwed up.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, really screwed up. And now he's trying to make it better. He wants to visit her in prison. And he's literally, that last scene where he's in prison trying to convince her to go with him and the devil versus stay here and die. He is literally torn between the two forces. The devil is pulling him on one side. And then Gretchen is pulling him back. Not physically pulling him, but pulling him with those cords of sympathy and love and compassion to stay and to be with her and maybe to die with her. But he's not going to do that. So ultimately he leaves her alone, and I guess she is rescued by the angels or whatever, but she dies. She does.
Well, yeah, let's go to this scene. This is the final scene, the dungeon scene. So at this point, Gretchen has, by most accounts that I've read, lost her mind. She's singing, and she doesn't even recognize Faust when he enters. I mean, what do we make of that? Is that just like kind of classic dissociation? Like,
I think you're right. I think she is literally is losing touch with reality because of the horrific things that have happened to her. She lost her brother, her mom. She killed her child. I mean, it's just like she went from being this perfect little flower to being a murderer and a criminal and an outcast in a period of a few weeks.
Right, and it's just too much.
Right, and she is like you said, she is 14.
Yeah.
Just it's insane, right? What
the weight of it all. Yeah. Well, and so Faust tries to convince her to leave with him.
Right.
And she doesn't come with him.
Right.
And this to me seems very significant because, again, we asked this question, like, what is she not willing to do?
Correct.
She's not willing to go with him. When she denies Faust, there's this voice from above that's, in my translation, just says redeemed.
Yeah, she says there towards the end, judgment of God, to thee I surrender. Mephistopheles says she is condemned, and yet the voice from heaven says redeemed or saved, and then they part ways.
Yeah.
So she goes up to heaven. Faust goes with Mephistopheles to their next adventure, so to speak. But she is saved, at least from kind of a heavenly perspective, right? Even though her life has been ruined by him, she is redeemed.
Her soul is saved.
Her soul is saved, yeah.
The way this part one ends, I mean, when I first finished it, I was sufficiently bummed out for the rest of the day, maybe even the rest of the week. Most people, when they read Goethe's Faust, just read part one. Do you think part one can stand alone, or does it only make sense within the conceptual framework of both parts? And the follow-up to that is, if it can stand alone, what's kind of some of the major take-homes from this tale?
I think partially, yes, it can stand on its own feet because it introduces all the major themes. What it doesn't do is it doesn't follow through to the arc of their completion and their fulfillment or not fulfillment, right?
Like, we don't know if Faust wins the wager.
Right, we don't know how that wager ends.
Yeah.
We don't know what else is on the agenda.
Yeah.
And what else is on the agenda is actually pretty exciting, which is, again, this attempt at synthesis, right? Faust lives in the medieval world, and he's trying to create a new world, a brave new world, to borrow a phrase. How does that work or not work? And what is a result of trying to reconcile classical tradition and learning and ideals with the modern world? Or what if we brought in some additional features to that, maybe from earlier tradition of knighthood and chivalry, and brought that in?
Yeah.
What if we actually tried to bring in this Apollonian, to borrow Spengler's word, Apollonian civilization, and bring up Helen, and see if Gretchen can't satisfy Faust because she's too provincial and too limited by her religion, by her background. What if we brought in this idealized female beauty and just an ideal woman, essentially?
Yeah.
Would she be able to provide what Faust is looking for? So all of those questions are answered in part two. Remain to be seen. So in some ways,
listen to part two.
Exactly.
That too.
Exactly. So, but part one sets up the stage, and it illustrates the questions, right? Einstein said it's more important to know what questions to ask than to know the answers.
Yeah.
So this sets up the questions, and then you can try to answer them yourself, or you can read part two and see how Goethe answered them and see if you agree or disagree with that.
Great. Well, I think that's a perfect way to end it. Thanks so much, Phil. I'm looking forward to unpacking part two with you.
All right. Sounds great.
Hey, this is Zach. Thanks for listening to Unpacking Ideas. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, be sure to follow it so that you get notified every time I release an episode. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, I'd really appreciate if you could take a few seconds to rate the show. This really helps with the algorithm so that more people can discover it. Also, if you would like to get in touch with me or to hear about what's coming up next on the podcast, visit unpackingideas.com/podcast. And there I post links to books and essays that we'll be discussing on future podcast episodes. All right, that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next episode.